Yeah.
Director Carr, so that
Not a fence, okay.
Chairman Carr, NRPC. What being added against NRPC?
Mason from the NRPC. And I guess we'll just go down the list. Kimberly from DOT, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. This is Kim from DOT. I work with Linda Duensberry, and I'm not sure she's going to be able to attend today.
All right. Tim White.
Tim White, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services.
Wendy.
Wendy Hunt, Greater Nashua Chamber of Commerce.
Brian Groth.
Yeah, Brian Groth, Town of Hudson.
Joan Cudworth.
Hi, Joan Cudworth, Director of Public Works, Town of Hollis.
John Savage.
Good afternoon, John Savage, Nashua Transit.
Julie Chismas.
Hi there, Julie Chismas, City of Nashua.
Leah Sermon.
Hi, Leah Sermon, Federal Transit Division.
Lee Levine.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Lee Levine, Federal Highway Administration.
Matt Sullivan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Matt Sullivan, City of Nashua.
Natasha.
Natasha Kipper, Town of Amherst.
Peter Howe.
Peter Howe, Town of Wilton.
Okay, and did I miss anybody? The list is changing up on me, but I think I got most everybody.
Rep. Marty Jack from House Public Works and Highways.
Thank you. Rep. Marty Jack. Lincoln, you were talking to.
Yep, sorry about that, Representative Marty. Lincoln Daily, Town of Milford.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, so actually I've been anticipating this return to an in-person meeting for quite a while now because we're going to resolve one burning transportation question that's been in my mind. How far will people be willing to travel for slice of pizza? And then we could see the answer. Concord is definitely out. A number of other people not making the trek. So we're really enjoying the pizza here. Sorry we couldn't do delivery. In person next time. So let's start off with the minutes of June 9th, 2021. I wasn't here, so I have actually no idea whether they're accurate or not, but are there any questions or revisions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
A second. All in favor? All opposed? Stay. Okay, they're passed. So we'll move on to our first agenda item, which is the presentation of the congestion management process draft report. So I'm going to sort of run through what essentially is an executive summary of the document. I'm wondering, did anybody actually read through the entire report? Show of hands here. No. So what is a congestion management process? It's required by the federal government for transportation management areas, MPOs such as ourselves. And these are areas 200,000 or greater population. It involves the multimodal system. We find it really focused more on highways, but we look at all aspects of transportation. And its purpose is to develop measures to evaluate congestion levels, establish a program for data collection and system performance monitoring, identify and evaluate CMP strategies for inclusion in the MPP, and follow an 8-step framework for federal compliance. Develop regional objectives, define the CMP network, develop multimodal performance measures, collect data, and monitor system performance, analyze congestion problems and needs, identify and assess strategies, program and implement strategies, evaluate strategy effectiveness. So the staff has developed a set of goals and some strategies to achieve those goals. And if you have comments, just speak up. And this is something that it's in draft form, and we're looking for your input for it. So goal number one, reduce transportation network congestion and improve efficiency. So we want to maintain what is called travel time reliability greater than 90% on the national highway system. And we have established a field target of 85%. Most of you are familiar with the TTR concept. It's really a way to measure congestion that doesn't regularly occur. It occur due to accidents or work zones or weather conditions or so forth. We want to maintain level of service C, and improve where level of service is at D or worse in urban areas, and maintain level of service B along rural networks. We want to reduce the rate of growth or achieve decreases in vehicle miles of travel and vehicle hours of travel. Identify lane geometry changes or capacity increases to reduce congestion, and to provide traveler information that enables avoidance of congested routes. Goal number two, increase mobility for alternative modes. So we're looking for implementation of projects in the 2021 bicycle pedestrian plan, which has been produced in draft form. Increase the mode share on the Nashua transit system. Fill accessibility gaps. And this really refers to the transit last mile connections. If we have, say, an intercity transit service and they drop you off in a parking lot, and how do you get from there conveniently to your ultimate destination? And lastly, to encourage intercity public transportation. Goal number three is to improve safety performance. This involves reduction in vehicle crashes, particularly those involving non-motorized users. Provide adequate facilities for bicyclists. This will be through provision of adequate paved shoulders, dedicated path, and to improve what we call the level of traffic stress for bicyclists. This measures how much stress that the bicyclists are experiencing out on the roadways, and we use that as a surrogate for their level of congestion. And maintain a state of good repair for the transportation network. So the CMP network itself has all of the state numbered highways that are within the urban area. Also includes Main Street, Nashua, Daniel Webster Highway in Nashua, Greeley Street and Continental Boulevard in Merrimack, Nashua Transit System routes, Boston Express route, and park and ride lots. And the feds prescribe a CMP toolbox that gives us actual strategies that we can look into to achieve our goals for congestion reduction. These include highway physical improvements, increasing lanes, turn lanes, interchange reconfiguration, transit strategies include expanding the existing NTS service area, expanding into new service areas, parking ride expansion or construction of new parking rides, employer micro transit services, and these are essentially where an individual employer or perhaps a group of closely clustered employers will contract for the service to bring people to their facility from beyond. Transit amenities and passenger rail extension. And bicycle pedestrian improvements are in the toolbox, including bike lanes and trails, safety improvements, bicycle amenities, such as exit stations in town. Transportation system management and operations, include optimization of signals, signal coordination, information and incident management systems, and all electronic tolling. Transportation demand management is also part of the strategy. We encourage telecommuting, teleconference, flex hours, ride sharing programs. Some of these certainly being favored during the COVID era, and we hope that people will continue to utilize some of these strategies and that employers will be comfortable allowing employees to do so. Access management includes left turn restrictions, driveway consolidation, frontage roads. So congestion measures. In this report, we look at several different ways of evaluating congestion. Most popular these days is to look just at speed, but we go beyond that because I think there's alternative ways that we want to approach this. So we start off with looking at traffic count trends. because this tells us where, we've been trending in recent years. And, some facilities are definitely headed in different directions from the others. And as you can see from the data, there's a lot of flat to actually negative growth over the past decade or so along our highways. And there's really just a few areas that have experienced rapid growth. Turnpike up at Merrimack is one of these areas, and that's one reason we're evaluating, we're about to undertake a study to look at that area and how to address congestion. Along the most traveled section of the Turnpike in Nashua, we have seen still positive growth, but it's just barely over the 1% range. Moving down to 101A, or basically slightly negative growth in recent times. 101 varies from flat growth to slight growth. 3A in Hudson, it's been negative in one portion, just slightly positive than the other, as well as the Sycamore Bridge, just over 1% per year growth. 111 through Nashua and Hudson, it tends to be negative, slightly on the negative side. Until we get to west of Kimball Hill Road, where the traffic rate of increase really picks up. And continuing 102 in Hudson, 30 in Nashua, slightly negative growth there. So forth as we go on. Most notable on the downside is Main Street in Nashua. So that's actually been averaging 3% per year over the last decade or so. And I recall back in the 90s, I think we were about 37,000 per day for Main Street. So, there's been capacity reductions that have been implemented on a temporary basis, to allow for dining facilities. And that's shut it down to one lane in some places. Should traffic want to increase, should there be the type of development that would naturally bring that traffic, it's very difficult.
If I could just interject, for people on the Zoom call, are you able to see the presentation?
No.
No. All right, yeah, I got a text to that effect. Sorry about that, everyone.
Sorry.
Try to troubleshoot.
You'd think some of them would be like, I can't see, probably having pizza too there.
I thought that's why we get the presentation sent in advance. I was like, all right.
In person.
Well,
They do have
their agenda packet.
Right there.
The annual countdown.
Over what time period is that correct?
It varies, but I'm going back basically 10 years, and we have different ranges for different facilities. But it's a long-term trend that we're looking at.
Those not just COVID.
No, this trends in the dense city area. Been running that way for quite a while. Really since 2000, early 2000s, since last time I really saw increases.
All right.
Somewhere south.
Can they see it now?
I'm guessing no, but can people see the presentation now?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome.
It's like not showing me on the screen, so it's all a little wonky.
Okay, so the show goes on. The next congestion measure, the peak period speeds and the travel time index. So travel time index is the measure as opposed to travel time reliability. The TTI measures the recurring congestion that we see out there for peak periods generally. So this is the average travel time from the period divided by the free flow. I've provided ranges of TTI indices that are associated with level of congestion. And it's, you know, very subjective as to, you know, what constitutes minor versus moderate, but, you know, I looked it over for quite a while, gave it some thought. And we're basically, looking at the same type of ranges, so the New Hampshire Planning Commission was established, so I think it's pretty well defined situations. I also, for expressways, we can tie these to specific speed ranges, obviously for other facilities we don't, because they have different speed limits on them. And in the case of signalized corridors, you really have to do adjustments for the traffic lights as well to determine what is a free flow speed. So I give the definition here for the travel time reliability. It's the 80th percentile speed divided by the 50th percentile. This is a system-wide measure. We do not do that for the individual facilities the way we calculate TTI for the individual roadways. So TTI is really the measure that we're relying on for the congestion measure in this regard. So looking over, we see the results color coded. So the greens, this is basically following the traffic light analogy. With we got a fourth one in there for orange. So green is the best, and you know, shows TTIs under 1. So we only see a few locations that really have serious problems in our region. I think these are pretty familiar to us. You know, we see Merrimack Turnpike is a problem. 111A, Nashua, Hudson, crossing over is a real problem. These are really extreme, heavy congested areas. There's a lot of oranges in there as well. And where you get to the yellows, it's moderate congestion. It's a pain out there, but it's not what we would call extremely serious in most cases. We use the NPM RDS data set for this, and I had to work quite a bit with that data set because I didn't really trust the way it was calculating travel time indices. It was making some assumptions about free flow speeds that, well, for example, they would say the posted speed limit on 101A is 45. That's what they're assuming for free flow speed. But when you consider all the traffic lights that are in there, you're not going to be able to achieve that type of speed even during off-peak hours. He's looking at me, maybe he does do it during the off-peak hours. But what I did was actually look at the 9 to 10 p.m. period and what's the average speed during that time. That's what I'm calling the free flow speed. So that's how the TTIs are calculated for that period. And then moving on, the congestion measures measured by volume to capacity ratios and level of service. I think most of us are familiar with these concepts of level service A being a completely uncongested condition, and level of service E being the condition where we've reached capacity, and then we think worse than that would be F. And I've associated this with speeds that we see on uninterrupted flow arterials. I did a lot of research, see what others are doing. There's no set standard for this really, but looking it over, you know, I decided on these ranges, and then I looked at signalized arterials and broke it down by the number of signals that are present, you know, for a given roadway segment. So for example, if you have 4 or more signals, signalized intersection per mile, you can't even achieve level of service speed. Level of service C would be the best that you can really obtain. And then we apply these in the next table by facility.
This is the right.
Sorry. This is definitely, there's a disconnect here between what it's showing them, so sorry.
We've had a disconnect.
Well, it's been disconnected for a little while.
You can use the keyboard to go back on.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where we are. Okay, so I've put together a table here, which shows for each facility, kind of, the worst areas that you could find out there. And, level of service E or F obviously are unacceptable even in urban areas, and we need to look at means to improve these. So looking at the turnpike with the Merrimack section, there's a widening program that will be implemented that should bring these down to quite acceptable levels of service. US 3 is also degenerated in recent years, high traffic growth. We're looking at the E to F condition out there. 101A is pretty well set at E in Nashua. And again, there's a widening program that should be able to address a good deal of that problem. 3A in Hudson, south of Boston Road, F and E, this is the next project, we'll be addressing that. 111 west of Wall Street. I'm actually getting ahead of myself and talking about the improvements since we do list them later. And also level service E to F conditions. 102 is a D, that's acceptable. 130 as well. And then in the rural areas where we don't have all that many problems. Okay, so Greeley Street and Merrimack is another location that we have level service E. That's the start there. So we'll move on to bicycle congestion. And here we measure by level of traffic stress. And there's a number of factors that go into that. Matt, I don't know if you want to just list off the factors that go into LTS development.
Yeah, so bicycle level of traffic stress, one is for anybody, a little kid could ride their bike on it and not feel stressed. And that would be a cul-de-sac, right? And no measure is really needed there to bring it up. It's already, in good shape. LTS 2 is a little more traffic stress. A bicyclist will feel more. It's got to do with proximity to motor vehicles and the speed of vehicles and the volume of vehicles and the width of lanes and so on. So LTS 2 is kind of acceptable to most people that are, wary of riding a bike or wary of traffic, but willing to ride if there's a little bit of separation from motor vehicles. And then LTS 3 and 4 are the higher levels of stress, and most people aren't going to ride their bike on those types of roads. So LTS 2 is kind of what you would think that most people would be okay with.
And some of the factors that go in, so there's the vehicle traffic, the paved shoulder width.
Whether there's a bike lane or not, volume of traffic, speed of traffic, width of the travel lane, how many lanes of traffic, type of thing.
So we actually measure these things. So when you look at the individual facilities, most of them have some conditions that are not all that good. Say some improvements. I tried to divide segments where there were clear breaks in LTS.
I think just important to note, though, as we've noted internally, this analysis is based on posted speed. And that's definitely something we want to modify for the future because we know that there's a significant disconnect between posted speed and actual speed.
Right.
Okay, and moving on to Nashua Transit Systems, since we're doing a multimodal analysis here. So NTS helped me out quite a bit on this. Lori looked over data and gave me how much of the buses filled during various time periods. It's not exact because, unless you have somebody riding the buses and actually doing the counts and determining what the peaks are, but she gave me some data and we worked to make some assumptions on this. And the bottom line is it's generally not very congested. I think if you were, and this is by time period, if you were to look at individual runs, you might get some substantially higher ones, but I don't know what your feeling is. Are there times when buses are really filled up? to the brim.
To the brim. Just,
Well, let's
just
say-
recently, John had mentioned in a meeting earlier today, he can speak to this, that they're starting to increase the number of people that are riding certain routes. John, which routes were the ones that you were talking about that were full?
The ridership is rebounding more rapidly on the routes 2A, 6, and 6A. That also happens to be the routes that we see the highest level of congestion and on-time performance challenges.
So that's showing the same or similar statistics right there. In on your spreadsheet.
So probably within the next year to two, at some point, we would do another on-board survey. It might make sense for the person administering the survey to actually try to determine by account what the peak ridership is for any particular route. That we can greatly improve this table. It's an estimate, really.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, the other challenge we have is obviously this is data. We redesigned these routes, and so 5 of the routes listed here are no longer running. So
Yeah. Okay, and then the other thing that we looked at was the NTS route on-time performance. Again, Lori was very helpful in providing data for this, and we have no set goal, but I think the 5-minute delays is what we're trying to generally stay under, and the system is performing well, definitely. Not that there's much that you can necessarily do other than to change schedules to, so it's that people have a better idea when they expect the bus to come by their bus stop. But the buses are stuck in traffic along with everybody else, so. I mean, unless on-time performance is because you're like the MBTA, you're breaking down everywhere. It's not your fault. Okay, so moving on then with congestion mitigation strategies. Many of these, obviously, we recognize from our 10-year plan or our metropolitan transportation plan, but some are new things that we're going out there. So Turnpike, you'll see the problems that Merrimack looking to widen to a continuous 3-lane section or exit 7 that should restore conditions to where they need to be. There's going to be some problems in the work zone during the construction period, I'm sure. So that's what we call the unreliable congestion, non-recurring congestion. All electronic tolling at the Bedford mainline toll will also improve the situation. There's a project to reconfigure the exit 5E interchange, which is hazardous and congested. And then we're going to be starting to look at the need for a full interchange at exit 12. There's a study done about 15 years ago. We're going to update it starting soon in September. New Hampshire 101. Jennifer Rizek was here a while back to talk about the safety program that they're proposing. So this improves intersections on 101 with 101A, Pheasant Road, Hampshire 13, and Horace Freeland Road. It provides passing lanes for a 4,400-foot section in Milford. Also, we recommend investigating potential corridor segments for a non-motorized path on US 3, safety and capacity improvements to US 3 and Wire Road. It's a timber plan project, improvements to facilitate bicycle and pedestrian access, and seek funding to extend NTS service along US 3 for the transit expansion study that we did recently. New Hampshire 3A, continued use and maintenance of the Hudson traffic signal management system. Construct the third southbound right turn lane from Boston Road to Sagamore Bridge Road. That's a CMAQ project. And again, seek funding to extend NTS service along 3A. New Hampshire 101A, lots of suggestions here, implement a coordinated signal management system. And this had been done using CMAQ funds back in the late 90s. And it worked, right? But it's hard to maintain that, especially when you're adding more signals.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if, I think I quite seen it done before, but can we apply for projects strictly to collect the data and improve the time of day and day-of-week corridor coordination plans? Just from an operational perspective.
You're saying just do a study as opposed to a CMAC
Well,
application to actually.
study to follow up with redoing the phasing and timing to improve the data. We can have data programs for the corridors. I think I've seen New Hampshire DOT put
Yeah, I think
projects in.
yeah, I mean, it would definitely be a valid CMAC project, since they've done it before, or, you know, they may be able to go with another source, but.
And while we're on it, exit 5E, is that's now a congestion management project, right? I know we're receiving.
Well, if it's a safety problem that results in crashes, yeah, that's a congestion problem.
Well, yeah.
It's all part of
The
it.
we, yeah.
Yeah, the we. That's
Stops
like-
traffic.
I was personally observing that to see what the situation was.
Well, we've had DOT and federal highway down here to look at it.
It's nasty.
Yeah.
So it's funded. Okay. So widen 101A to maintain 3-lane sections from Somerset Parkway to Lena Avenue. Safety improvements at 101A, Cottonwood Boulevard, Craftsman Lane, and Boston Post Road. So those are 2 10-year plan projects. Improvements to the Hampshire 101A, Hampshire 13 Milford Oval, also ongoing project. Intersection improvements, circulation modification, New Hampshire 101A, Main Street, Nashua, it's a CMAC project. Continue extended NTS service on 101A to Walmart. Does that appear to be in the cards? Past the CMAC funding period.
As of right now, we don't have any plans to implement expansion.
Well, would just be maintaining the
Maintaining.
Walmart.
We're keeping all the routes as they are at the time.
Okay.
John, do you have anything to add? He's very.
Yeah,
familiar.
no, just to clarify that the funding that we're using currently to run that route out to Walmart is set to run out. I know that I think we're good through like 18 months or 2 years, but we'll have to look at the funding solution for that in the future.
Right. And then,
Now I understand your question.
yes, okay. And then again, as you know, with the other transit expansion recommendations, seek funding to extend service out to Milford Center. And then finally, construct a non-motorized path along Hampshire 101A rail corridor. This is a planning effort that's getting underway. Matt's very involved in that. New Hampshire 102, monitor the intersection with Page Road for potential signal or other improvements. I looked at that once before, did not meet signal wards. Didn't seem overly bad, but those keep watching it. Complete the bicycle lane from Talbot Drive to Mega Drive. So I was a little bit interested in the fact that our LTS was a solid 3.0 along there, but there is that gap. So people think that the LTS might be worse along the section where there's a gap, but just something, you know, some of these areas I think we need to take a second look at. New Hampshire 111, improve East Hall Street from Main Street to C Street and from C Street to Taylor Falls Bridge. It's in the 10-year plan, as well as reconfigure the turnpike exit 5E and implement bicycle pedestrian accessibility improvement project. New Hampshire 130, disruptive Broad Street Parkway interchange to Franklin Street and reconstruct from Coburn Ave, Coliseum Ave to improve safety. That second one is MTP project, not a 10-year plan project at this time. New Hampshire 38, we looked at 3 intersections for the potential to implement flashing yellow signals. That these were identified by DOT. There were a number of statewide signals that we're looking at. So these are candidates, and we recommend that yellow signals be seriously considered here and at many other locations where it's safe to make the left turn. Finding yourself staring 1,000 feet ahead with no oncoming vehicles, why not be allowed to make the turn if it's safe? And that's my editorial comment. Widen paved shoulders along the northern segment, because I've gotten a traffic ticket for that. Widen paved shoulders along the northern segment for safe bicycle travel. And New Hampshire 128 and 111A, improvements at the intersection of 128 and 111A and 128 Sherburne Road. So these are in the 10-year plan on CMAC for roundabouts or other improvement types. New Hampshire 38 can start the southbound left turn lane onto Old Milford Road. No, this is New Hampshire 1-3. Typo and improve the intersection with Main Street. Now we get to 38, evaluate the need for circulation improvements in the Monument Square area. Evaluate the need for so that's 1. 2. All screwed up. So we're looking at the Monument Square area now. We're about to start a study to look at the weeding that goes on in there, whether some TSM type improvements. Evaluate the need for changes to lane geometry to improve school access and widen shoulders to improve segments rated LTS 4. And then Main Street, again, the CMAC project in Whiteville area, Cross Street Parkway interchange with Franklin Street, both benefit Main Street and reconstruct the Main Street Railroad crossing. Daniel Webster Highway, Nashua. Here again, I see the potential for a coordinated signal management system and on-motorized travel safety improvements. Greeley Street.
We actually have something on the way for that.
Yes, that's in the plan.
Well, no, we have it on the developer of the East Bedford Road project. It's going to be contributing funding for VHB and the signal contractor to redo these.
For the signals.
Yeah, DW Highway and Bedford Road.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like shoot me some information on that. Put that in the revised
Sure.
report. That would be good.
Yep.
They want to see all the things that we're doing out there.
Yeah.
Even if it's not federally funded, but
yeah,
that's good. Greeley Street and Continental Boulevard in Merrimack. Again, optimization strategies. There's several signals that are very close to each other. There might well be some improvements that could be done there. Widen shoulders to improve high school LTS. And then we're looking at regional strategies for transportation systems management, expand ITS devices to advise of incidents and alternative routes available. You see a lot of these sign message boards out there saying put on your mask, and like more of these say alternative routes because there's a crash up ahead and they're going to be sitting there for half an hour. 2 editorial comments. That's my point. Increased roadway monitoring by NHDOT, TMC, and install flashing yellow signals really throughout the region wherever it makes sense to replace the red arrows so that you get through the traffic faster. And then regional transit expansion, I've mentioned some specifics. Additionally, evaluate the need for additional parking lot capacity to accommodate the intercity transit users. The exit 8 lot before COVID was pretty well filled. We did counts out there, 90% or more capacity. Doesn't provide a lot of additional room for new bus riders. I know that situation has changed and a lot lower now, but we'll get back to that level someday. They're going to need to expand a lot or build another one. Evaluate the potential for transit service to Manchester Center and the regional airports. I mentioned earlier the NTS potential extensions to Hudson, Milford, and Merrimack, and to promote transit connections to the Boston metro area, through operation of shuttles, the Lowell Terminal, the MBTA station, or passenger rail extension to Nashua. These were looked at in our recent interregional transit study. So that's the summary of the draft report. We have received comments already from Federal Highway Administration, so they're actually fairly extensive. So my original plan to have MPO approval of the document in September is going to have to be delayed until December. But that's good because it gives you more time to do your review and get us your comments and suggestions. And really, you know, if you're having trouble sleeping at night, this is the perfect antidote for the problem.
It helps during the day.
If you're supposed to be doing that for
Kimberly Romo from DOT said if anybody has any questions on CMAC, you can shoot her an email. Oh, she's unmuted.
Yes, please do. I will forward anybody's email for any questions that I cannot answer. I will speak to Linda and any other project managers.
Thank you.
Welcome. And I did send you an email also, Matt.
Okay. Ready to move on to our next topic, which is the Capital Corridor Project Development Phase update. We've had recent developments on that, and Jay will inform you.
I'll wait for the slides.
Yeah.
As we're waiting for the slides, though, you know, just very, very briefly, for those of you who were able to attend the stakeholders meeting that DOT held on the 9th, you'll recognize these slides. These were lifted directly from that presentation. So this is really intended to be just a very brief update for folks who have not really been following the project in depth. So hopefully we will get to the slide stack shortly, but in the interim, at least if you can hear me, just to kind of set this, I think that there has been a lot of confusion around what the project actually is. I noticed I've certainly been seeing that in kind of a lot of the chat online. So just as a basic overview reminder, the Capital Corridor project that is currently under evaluation now is a direct outcome of the 2014 feasibility study that was conducted that looked at various alternatives for providing, I was going to say, you know, passenger rail to Nashua, but really transit connections between Nashua and Boston, because they did look at a variety of alternatives. The preferred alternative that came out of the 2014 study is what's known as the Nashua-Manchester connection. Can we scoot the people over a little bit?
Yep.
People, that's for those in the room who couldn't see it. So just to outline what is currently under evaluation is an extension of existing MBTA commuter rail service that currently runs between North Station in Boston and terminates in Lowell. So this is a direct extension of that service. I'll try to answer questions as I go, or maybe after if people are putting any comments into the chat. Significantly, we're looking at, again, this is what came out of that study. Everything could change. 34 trips per day to Nashua, 16 continuing on to Manchester. So just in terms of the project status, for those who are familiar with it, we are in now what's called the project development phase. That phase really kicked off formally earlier this year when DOT brought the consulting firm AECOM under contract. So I believe that was in January. So we're really actively going through this process. It's about a 2-year process, and there are going to be some, you know, significant milestones as we go along. Moving on to the next slide, if we could. I'll back up, stay on this slide for just 1 second. Significantly, we talked about the service between Lowell and Manchester. What's contemplated is a stop in South Nashua, a stop at Crown Street near downtown Nashua, a stop in Bedford that would serve the airport, and a stop in downtown Manchester. And there will also be a layover facility that's planned in Manchester as well, which is very significant to the success of the project. So that we can click on. So again, just overview the project objectives. Really the main thing here is to just understand what's happening in this project development phase. And actually it's not all on the slide, but the real critical takeaways here are that this phase of the project is going to take it to 30% design. That's really, that's significant. So we're going to take the engineering to that point. That allows us, I say us, it's not us, it's DOT and their consulting team. So us, we, if I say that, it's the collective, we, the collective us. So taking it to 30% design is critical because that allows the environmental assessment to be performed, which is key. And also the creation of a detailed financial plan, which is obviously critical. That speaks to feasibility. And I think for so many of the questions that we hear about this project are very much focused on cost. And when I say cost, you can hear the term sustainable there. It's both the capital cost as well as the ongoing operational cost and how that's ultimately going to be paid for. I think we've often heard our DOT commissioner say there are no buckets of money out there that could support this project today. So ultimately, that means new buckets. So nevertheless, this is what the project development phase is essentially going to accomplish. Why that's critical is what that does is take us to the point, should we decide as a state that we want to move forward, to apply for new starts or small starts funds, hopefully small starts funds, that would allow us to move forward with the project. I say hopefully small starts because there are some legislative initiatives that are happening right now at the federal level that could raise the threshold for small starts projects. Why that matters is that the process for going through small starts is less cumbersome than new starts. So at any rate, certainly more to come on that front. What's really key for us right now is we are at a point of needing to finalize the station locations. Really can't advance detailed engineering until that issue's been resolved. So if we can move forward to the next slide.
Just 1 second. Julie asked a question in chat, and Julie, do you want to ask the group that?
Sure. I was just wondering if, I see provide alternative to congestion, and I know most of that is south of our border, but I'm wondering if this project should be included in the CMP. I saw I did see passenger rail as in the toolbox, but I didn't see it in any of the strategies. So I'm just wondering if that maybe should be added.
Actually, I think that's an excellent point, Greg.
Yeah, we see it as a possible strategy for the long term.
I think it's an excellent point.
The thing is, though, it's a CMP for our region, and passenger rail is going to reduce travel in Massachusetts, not in our region. So.
Well, I was just thinking if we had a stop in Manchester, there may be people who currently are using the turnpike to go to Point South, or I know probably using 93. I get that, but I just thought it might alleviate some. I recognize where the stations are. I was trying to make it work in my head, but I do think it could, because some people will not take 93, maybe from Hudson, would take the train in out of Nashua.
Well, it's a good point. You recall back in 2018, shortly after I started, I was asked to do a little analysis of the impact on the turnpike from passenger rail. So that's actually, I could just lift that analysis and put it into the CMP. I think that would be that would be a good addition.
I just think it helps when you're looking for funding. The more plans you can get the project in, the better off you are when you go to get those grant funds.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point, and it also strengthens one of the arguments in favor of the project south of the border. So yeah, thank you for that.
Jay,
yes.
Has design build been considered as an option for the without going to bid? Just design.
I would imagine that that's a consideration that will be on the table. I don't think that's a part of currently what's being studied, but I think certainly. I think that's a consideration that I imagine the DOT would also be evaluating.
I was wondering also if private party funding of the rail initiative as part of the teaming with the government kind of thing.
I think right now everything is on the table when it comes to funding and financing, and some level of private contribution towards this project, however that is constructed, public-private partnerships, that's absolutely under consideration. And as I was saying earlier, there is no existing funding source in the state of New Hampshire today that could be used to support the cost of this project. So we have to identify new funding sources one way or another. So I do think everything's on the table, and that's going to be a significant part of that financial analysis. That's also a part of the project development phase. So just kind of zooming in on hopefully what you can see on the map. As I mentioned, there are going to be 2 station sites in Nashua. Crown Street is set. We know where that's located. There's some details around the design of the station. They're still being worked out, but there are 2 alternative station sites that are currently under consideration for South Nashua. One of those is what we know is being called the Skipper Road site, often called the Dow site in Nashua, site of former Dow Chemical, and the other is Pheasant Lane Mall. And we could advance. What's not shown on here, and wish it were, maybe we'll make a new slide for ourselves, is the Bedford Station. And why I emphasize the Bedford Station, it actually doesn't show up in the presentations that were being done to Nashua or Manchester. But I do think the Bedford Station is significant to note because of its location just north of the Merrimack line and its proximity to 101 and exit 13. For a lot of folks in Merrimack, that's going to be the station that makes the most sense for them to access. That's also going to be true for people on the other side of the river living in, say, Litchfield. That's going to be the most convenient station, maybe Londonderry as well. So depending on where you're located, I do believe that Bedford Station serves the region, even though it's not located in the city of Nashua. So more to come on that in the future, I'm sure. But that location is also largely set. So what you're seeing here is the Crown Street Station. You may not know this site. If you've gone to one of our household hazardous waste collections this year, you found the Crown Street site. It's a little out of the way, so I'm not surprised if a lot of people don't see it, but here it is, basically in the East Hollis Street area, near the Henry Hanger building, if you know where that is. So nevertheless, again, this station site is set. This is just, a concept of what it would look like. Right now, it's an existing park and ride. A lot of the facility improvements are already there. So again, some modifications will be necessary. Some more detailed design, but this is essentially set. So advancing to the next site. So this is the one of the South Nashua options. This is what's known as a specific Roadster Option. This is on land that was part of the Dow Chemical site, and there is a portion of the Dow Chemical site that is essentially been capped. Some people may know that there was significant contamination on this site. So part of the remediation is essentially there's a significant use restriction on this portion of the site. There's a use restriction on the entire site, but significantly here. So a parking lot makes sense on the site. DOT and their consultants, AECOM, are in active conversation with the property owner. I think many people may also know that there is a large Costco that is proposed on this site. I would say directly to the south, not directly, to the south of the parking lot that you can see. There is also a self-storage facility that is proposed on this site, and there are 1 or 2 other pads on this site. There is a residential use restriction on the property, so a vision of this as a TOD site with high-density residential it isn't going to happen.
The land for this is being donated as part of the applicant's planning board application right now. So you will have the land by the time that site is all full.
Right. Yeah, this is anticipated to be a site that's donated. There are some access changes that would be incorporated. In a future slide, you'll see some changes to access on here should this site be chosen as a result of the development. This doesn't fully reflect the access as now shown on the site plan, but pretty close. So again, there was, and of course, significantly, there's the potential for this to be donated. In both cases, you're looking at about a 450 to 500 space parking lot is what's desired. There are some advantages and disadvantages to each site. We can certainly talk about those later. But moving on to the next site. So this is initially, I will say, what was contemplated for the Pheasant Lane Mall site. And where we are looking at is the vicinity of the former Sears on the property. What you will notice here, what's actually probably not clear is, at least for the folks sitting in the back of the room, but you can see that there is a state line The Mass New Hampshire border runs, it's kind of a hard edge against the buildings running through the site. There was a real effort to keep all of the parking and all of the station improvements on the New Hampshire side of the border. I think that is now being potentially reconsidered. That is the reason why a structured parking garage was proposed. So their DOT and their consultants at Ecom are also in active conversations with the mall ownership. So there is definitely consideration for using existing surface parking that would be on the Massachusetts side of the border. I think there's still an interest, mainly for regulatory reasons, for keeping the station platform itself north of that line. So between the two sites, and as you may have noticed on the earlier slide, there is a significant distance between these two locations, and there are pros and cons to each of these locations. I think in both cases, it's fair to say that there are interested property owners. Obviously, the location at Pheasant Lane Mall is further south. Travel time coming north from destinations north in the region and in the state is higher to this site. We're talking minutes, but it is higher and than it is for the other site. That's also true if you're coming across the river from Hudson. It's about 3 to 4 minutes difference. And, there's a difference in entering and exiting the site because, of course, as we know, there is no full interchange at the, I'll still say former exit 36. I don't know what the number is. I'll remember it eventually. Should that interchange ever become a full interchange, that disparity in time would be, reduced significantly. So right now, the pros and cons of each of these sites are under active evaluation. There is another pro, to this side, I will say, Tingsboro, the town of Tingsboro is actively engaged in this project. It's a high priority for them. And obviously, I think there's a realization, I might be unfairly speaking for other people, but I think there's a realization that it's unlikely that there will be a Tingsboro stop. The South Nashua stop is going to be the Tingsboro stop, and they recognize that. Obviously, it's in Tingsboro's interest to come as close to that border as possible. So there's a political consideration, I guess, that we would have to consider as well. There's redevelopment opportunities that would have to be evaluated. Traffic impacts, again, that would have to be evaluated as well. So right now that's happening, that's critical. Although it's out of our region, similar conversations are happening in Manchester. There are 2 alternative primary, I guess I would say, alternative station locations in downtown Manchester. I know there was a presentation last week to the Board of Aldermen. So these have to be finalized. There's also 2 layover facility alternatives in Manchester. Those are also being evaluated right now. So this is just this is a key part of the project development phase now, is really pinning these issues down. There's a lot of public input that's been involved. A lot of things have to be considered. So that's basically where we are, and I think I've got a slide in here on the overall project timeframe, just for everybody to keep you on track as to where we are. But what we are, looking at is a 2-year process. So as you can see, you can go down through all of the individual tasks, but probably the most significant for most people is that it's anticipated that the project development phase is going to conclude in January of 2023. So that's gives it 2 years. That would then position the state, again, if the state decides it wishes to go forward and is happy with the results of the project development phase, to apply for federal funding at that time. So still a ways away, but there are going to be some other key junctures along the way where there is going to be more opportunities for public input and presentations. So thanks everybody at the DOT for providing the slides and the information. And I'm open to any questions if I can answer them, but I might not be able to.
Is there a stop planned at Manchester Airport?
Sorry?
Is there a stop planned at Manchester Airport?
Yes, the Manchester Airport stop would be in Bedford because tracks are all on the west side of the river. up, I should say, at that point. So that would be the stop, and there would have to be some sort of shuttle to the airport, which is really not uncommon. You know, usually, even if there's a station stop at an airport, there's still a shuttle to the terminals. So I think that's what would be anticipated.
They have existing shuttles around the parking lots anyway, so.
Exactly. Exactly.
Marty, Jack has a question.
Thank you. If I understand the timeline correctly, we should be deciding on the locally preferred alternative for the Nashua station this month. And who's going to do that?
As I understand it, that's going to be a DOT decision in consultation, certainly with stakeholders in Nashua. But I think it's going to be a DOT decision. Given that both of the landowners appear willing. So that was the main thrust of the stakeholder meeting that was held in June, was to discuss the alternative sites and to get input. And subsequent to that, there have been some more focused meetings with both of the property owners and some of the Nashua officials. So it does need to be soon. So I do expect it'll be within about a month. But now is definitely the time to weigh in. If anybody does have thoughts or comments on those alternatives, this is a good time to weigh in on those.
Don't see any questions from anybody online.
More to come.
Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the 10-year plan process, now moving into the GASSET phase. All the projects have been submitted for our region, and the 10-year plan is now being developed. So there was an initial kickoff meeting, July 16th, hosted by GASSET, to give kind of the overview of where we are. Lots of data was provided in the presentation, and I have provided a slightly edited version of that presentation for you all. And you can always go to the DOT website. I provide the link if you want to see the remaining components. I'm not going to discuss everything that's in these slides here, but just some of the highlights. So beginning on page 2, you see the COVID impacts that are projected on the transportation revenues for the turnpike system, estimated loss of $9 million per year. There's been recovery certainly in the turnpike and other roadway traffic, but to some extent it seems to be stalled out, between the 6% to roughly 10% range, depending on the highway type. So this is impacting the tolls, it's impacting the gas tax revenues. So it's an issue that's out there. On page 3, the federal level reauthorization is in process, and that is looking relatively good. There's a couple of versions of bills out there. The Senate version would provide for a 22% increase in funding. The House version is 50% higher. So you probably have to think a more conservative increase is likely to prevail. We'll see how that works out. Following page for transit funding. So more uncertainty here in terms of what's going to be approved, but we have to expect significant increases in transit funding as well. Now, one thing we've been concerned about that hopefully would be addressed somehow is that when this region became a transportation management area, we lost transit funding. I guess under the reasoning that when you become a larger area, you're supposed to be able to handle more of the funding yourself. So the logic escapes me, but it's kind of how it's been explained to me. Is that correct, Julie? Yeah. So hopefully, our Congress people are at work in that regard. The infrastructure bill, I think we're probably looking about $1 trillion nationwide on that one. Not all of it for transportation. It was for a wide variety of infrastructural type programs. Moving on, then state impacts. Again, COVID is impacted the turnpike, the betterment program, and SB 367. These are tied to the gas tax. So, as the roadways are less traveled, people are gassing up less, and so there's less tax revenues. They're looking at statewide volumes down 5 to 7%. That's basically what we're seeing here overall. And where it trends from here, who knows? Or maybe it levels off at that level as some of us are now permanently telecommuting at least part of the time. The next page 6 talks about stimulus funds that are filling the gaps at present. And then following that, it's labeled page 9 gives the process, the timeline that we're in right now. We're looking at the next GASSET meeting, September 1st, and it's at that time that the 10-year plan will be released or reviewed. It's from the GASSET process to the governor. There will be public hearings throughout the state, September, October, locations and dates to be determined. And in January 22, the governor's draft will be transmitted to the legislature. They go through their review, whatever revisions at that point. And I believe in June, we'll be looking at the final 10-year plan process. And at that time, we'll have already started our project solicitation process for the next round. So it's not too early to be thinking about your project submissions. Okay, moving on to page 11, the proposed draft 10-year plan and strategies. The state's focus really is on maintenance and preservation for good reason. We can't just start building a bunch of new facilities or widening, things are crumbling elsewhere. They are assuming significant additional funds, as I mentioned in the pending legislation, so that will be a real positive. And to some extent, it's offset by the negative losing gas tax revenues at the state level. But they're looking to accelerate the existing 10-year plan projects where possible and consider new projects in the outer years that would improve safety and capacity. On page 14, they provide some projections of pavement condition, and see that their best projection shows a downward trend. So we're in good shape at the present, but in 2024, without boosted revenues, then we start to see lesser pavement conditions statewide. Likewise with bridges in the following page, beginning around 2027, the red list bridges stop declining in number and start increasing again. So that's you fix up ones that have a problem now, and then others degenerate over the years, and it's hard to keep up with them. So again, whatever funding comes out of the reauthorization process is going to be a real key to all of this. The next page shows the municipal red list totals, and they've been on the decline up to the present. But maintaining that trend is going to be a challenge. And the following page 17 talks about active transportation. Transportation that's good for you. It's going to be averaging 15 million per year.
Notably, though, that is specific projects. I think at this point, as I understand it, DOT is integrating multimodal transportation into all or most of their projects where applicable.
And you have the option of applying for projects under the TAP program, which will get you the project completed earlier, but it's highly competitive. Although there may be more funding than anticipated to fund these projects before you go through the 10-year plan process, which pretty much everybody who submitted in recent years has been able to get their projects funded because of over abundance of applications beyond our allocated funding. But in doing so, we are also going to the end of the 10-year list there. So it's a choice to make.
It's worth noting, though, that when opportunities like the infrastructure bill, come forward, projects in the 10-year plan can get advanced. So even though you're putting in a project today that might wind up at the end of that list, you never know. If that list gets advanced, you get that project sooner.
We're hopeful.
Right.
So the status of existing 10-year plan projects, 75% on track, advanced 4%, 21% have been delayed. A lot of the delays have to do with the loss of revenues that have occurred.
And for our region, probably most significantly is the 2-year delay on the turnpike widening.
So get out there, drive the turnpike, pay your tolls, help the cause.
Good one.
Amazed how many people go around that toll at Bedford right now. Get off the.
Northbound I do,
Yeah,
not southbound.
Yeah. Yeah, you should come that way in the morning sometimes. Definitely.
I'm just not going to inconvenience myself for 50 cents.
50 cents,
75. Depending on if you got easy.
I'm worried about social security, so that's why. Let's see, page 24, transit funding, 31 million per year. We do need that transit funding. This includes the New Hampshire Capital Corridor phase Jay talked about. Page 31, turnpike programs, there's the turnpike renewal and replacement, and there's the turnpike capital program. That one is going into our turnpike widening project in Merrimack. And then there's all electronic tolling. We're doing that, the Bedford tolls 2023. So right on through there. Then state funded programs, page 32. As I mentioned, the betterment, which is 3 cents from the state gas tax, and the SB 367, which was a 4.2 cent state gas tax increase. Those are impacted by declining mileage out there. Of course, there's been talk federally of a potential mileage tax. So we do recoup it that way. Stay tuned. And the following pages just go through the various programs. So I won't highlight those. Just come to page 39, the corridor study program. Mentioned that US 3 at Bedford Merrimack is one of the corridors to be studied. We're also looking at that area, identified congestion out there. So we're looking at the turnpike exit 12 as a full interchange is one means of addressing congestion.
Greg, it looks like Julie has a question.
Yes.
On the previous slide, slide 38, 13.4 in TAP funds. That's a pretty significant increase, and I'm wondering if you know more about that.
Heard about there is going to be an increase in it, so we're hopeful that additional projects that were submitted would be funded beyond what we would normally expect. We're always guaranteed one TAP project because we're in an area that has sub-allocation. So we are entitled to at least one project, even though a project likely exceeds our sub-allocation amount. We have to be funded for at least one project, but we're hopeful that we'll have several.
I don't know if anybody from DOT wants to comment on that, but my understanding is that there was a decision made to basically to double the amount of funding that was available in this year for this round. DOT folks might be able to speak to it better than I, but I think there is a goal in trying to get these funds expended and projects to move forward. And so perhaps by making it available to more projects, we can advance them as they come based on readiness. But I don't want to put words in DOT's mouth, but I think that that's what's anticipated. I think some people may also be aware that On the House side, there are, or proposed, I should say, what's called member-directed projects, which are essentially earmarks for specific projects that members of Congress can introduce, and or the House can introduce. And there are projects that have been that were top applications in this last round, as well as CMAQ applications that are proposed for funding. So that would also have the potential for freeing up additional funds for unfunded projects through TAP or through CMAQ, and advancing other projects as well. We'll see where that goes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I had heard about that, but to go from, what do we have, like 6.4 or something, or whatever,
Yeah,
like just over 5 to 13.4 is pretty huge.
It really is, and I think, and in part too, I think it was just a response to the demand that we saw out there, because the demand so far outpaced. I can't remember what it was, 28 million, or sounds about right, in projects that were submitted in the last round. So the demand is great, and frankly far greater than we're seeing for what I call more traditional, highway projects.
And the only thing I would add is that in a typical TAC round, we would have already found out what projects actually got funded, and we haven't yet. And I did reach out to Tom Jameson to see where that was at, and still don't know when that final decision will be made.
So it looks like we'll know by September 1st, right? The last bullet on the slide.
Exactly right.
But
Thank
based on the increase, if we were to get our quote fair share, we'd probably get 3 projects funded. Yeah, that would be bad. There would be more projects. Okay, so that really pretty much wraps up what I want to discuss on the GASA process. The next meeting will be September 1st. So next TTAC meeting will have more information for you. And I believe we have a schedule of the local public hearings. Okay, so that's the end of our regular agenda items. So we'll move on to updates. Any municipal updates on our communities today?
I would like to congratulate our DPW on getting a STEP grant from the Federal Highway Administration. This is a demonstration project. We were awarded $452,000 in federal funds to improve the make safety improvements to our mid-block crossings in our downtown area, which also includes like Kinsley and West Hollis. So some really high pet areas that are in desperate need of high-vis crosswalks due to the volume and speed of traffic going through there. So congratulations, DPW. We'll be reaching out to NRPC to help us collect the traffic counts, the ped counts before and after the project. As I said, this is a demonstration project. So we've got quite a bit of data collection and reporting to do associated with this. Thank you.
Julie, you also wanted some ATRs for the TAP grant, correct?
Yes, we are working through the contract for our TAP grant on Lock and Whitney Street, and that's going to involve, we have a traffic consultant coming on board to do because we're converting 2-ways to 1-way. So we will be doing a pretty intense traffic study, and we'll be relying on NRPC to help with the cost of that by doing the traffic counts for us. It'll be tube and TMCs.
Right, so you let us know the TMC locations. So will you be getting us the ATR soon? We have 3 other projects that we're also collecting for, so we're trying to schedule everything.
Yeah, I understand. We don't have our contract in place yet, and that's being reviewed by Tom Jameson right now. We're waiting for the notice to proceed.
Great. Okay, New Hampshire DOT. Any updates?
I do not at this time, but I will reach out. I can reach out to Tom Jameson also in regards to the TAP and when a decision will be made.
That we're in communication, so we're good. Yeah, yep, okay. Yep. So he's not holding it up. It just takes time. So thank you.
I sit right across from him so I can yell.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I should also note, so at the Gasset meeting, CNAC came up and normally we would be on schedule to be doing another round soon, but I think they're trying to stagger it with the TAP, which is still in process, so we're probably looking at least another year before CNAC at this point. That was the impression I got.
Yes, that's right.
So, okay, New Hampshire DES.
Yeah, two quick things, Greg. Before we get any further in the season, I just wanted to remind everyone again about the upcoming funding round for the State Clean Diesel Program. It'll be on or around October 1st. As we get a little bit closer to the date, I'll probably have some more news about that. The new fiscal year 2021 contract that we'll have with EPA is going to give us about $850,000 for available funding. So like I said, there will be more news about that upcoming a little bit further on in the season. And the second announcement I wanted to make, I'm pleased to announce that DES has been appointed by the governor as the new state lead agency for the Volkswagen settlement. That's pretty exciting news for us. It's going to obviously lead to some changes in the way that we do things related to the Volkswagen funding program. It's going to simplify things for us, but it's also going to dramatically increase our workload. So stay tuned for more news on that as it happens. So thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Okay, Federal Highway.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I guess the big news or the big update would be that, Tuesday's vote from the Senate to approve the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. So it's moving forward and we'll see where it goes from here, but that's an important step. So once we figure out and get information about what it means eventually when it's enacted to New Hampshire, of course, we'll be sharing all that information with our partners here in New Hampshire. So stay tuned and we'll see where that goes. And thanks again, Greg, for the CMP demonstration. And yeah, you mentioned the comments that we had submitted. So if you, I understand you're going to respond to them, but if you want to talk it over with our subject matter experts and see if there's any more information that we can provide or clarify any of those comments, just let me know and we're happy to do that. So thank you for that.
Well, I know the biggest piece of work there would be, so one of the comments was to address what are the impacts of the strategies that we're looking at. So yes, that can be done. And I had debated whether to actually go that far in CMP. I really hadn't seen extensive analyses done in others I looked at. But yeah, I mean, say where you're adding a lane, I can recalculate what VCs and level of service, for that improvement. That makes it a better document. I can also put in the passenger rail analysis that I've mentioned, and done several years ago. So these things can be put in there and make it a much better document. It's just going to take some time to do that, but it might well be worthwhile to do that. Some of the other things, like we don't attach costs to the improvements. Well, for some, they're in the TYP, so they've already been costed out, but where we have new concepts such as signal coordination, I don't want to just throw out a number off the top of my head. That's really, I think, part of the MTP development process to actually look at the finances and the constraints involved. And to me, the CMP is where you are looking at potential improvements that will get you there, and then you take that in the MTP and you do all the financial analysis. That's my viewpoint, but I'll address all of these in the follow up. But yeah, I would like to do some analysis of the project impacts out there. But I felt under some deadline to get this thing. Well, I was under a deadline. We had it in our 2-year DOT contract. And I thought I wanted to finish up a draft, to get the thing in. And frankly, I think it's more extensive than some of the other CMPs I've seen out there. But we can go further with it. It'll just take time.
Okay, well, let me know if you want to talk about it some more with with Corbin. Yep.
Okay, I mean, I'm on vacation next week, so it's going to be after that.
Okay.
So FTA was with us, right?
Oh, yeah, Leo was.
Leo was, she was, and no longer.
Looks like she left. though.
She left, okay, so no FTA update for today, so, I guess that's the end of it, then there'll be a motion to adjourn. Adjourn to more piece of. So,
Yeah.
okay, in a second,
Second.
okay, and anybody opposed to adjourning? Otherwise, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
So,
Thank
thanks
you.
for bearing with us, everybody online.
Two of the easiest folks in the